So tonight we have a very special event. We have three new UX people, and they're going to be in conversation with Lena from JP Morgan Chase. I knew Lena when she was but a mere product manager at Capital One. And so she's at JP Morgan Chase and is a UX research lead now. And she'll be talking with our three panelists. Austin Leslie, he's a first-year researcher at Rocket Mortgage. He's a proud graduate of the University of Michigan, and he always looks to design at the intersection of people, data, and technology. We're also going to talk with Melanie Medina. She graduated from the University of North Texas with her MS in Applied Anthropology and began her career in UXR at Usability Sciences, which is based in Dallas. I also worked there. And we're also going to talk with Bianca Gay, who is an experienced researcher, and she values intentional and strategic design principles. And she works at Foot Locker Digital, and she works to cultivate research to inform and inspire design decisions across mobile, web, and their app. So that is what we've got on tap tonight. Just so you guys remember, as always, make sure we treat everybody with respect, give everybody a chance to speak when we do our Q&A, as well as afterwards with our networking night. Sorry, it has been a long day. I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Lena. Lena, you and the three panelists should be co-hosts, so you guys should be able to take yourself off mute and go for it.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Laurie. I hope everyone is having a good morning, afternoon, evening. I saw that we have quite an array of folks from around the world. First, I want to thank you, UX Research and Strategy. I know I was at the first meetup that y'all hosted, and it was so fun. And y'all provide such great, fulfilling content. And so I'm so glad to be able to host this amazing event. The founders are amazing people. And so thanks, first of all, to y'all. I'd also like to thank the panelists. It is a bit of your time, but you're going to share so much knowledge today, and our community will be so grateful. So thanks. Thanks to our panelists and to everyone that's joining in tonight. Thank you for joining and learning and listening. The community is only as much as everyone in it. And so thank you, everyone. So Lori gave me a little pitch of who I am. So my name is Lena Watt. I'm the lead at JP Morgan Chase. I, like many of the hosts, the guests tonight, I also had moments of transition. And so I came from a product management background. I felt kind of the opposite. I feel like everyone is going to product now, but I decided to step foot out of it. I started my career into it, was in product, learned about design thinking, and that's kind of where I started falling in love with UX research. And then down the line, I finally made the decision. And that moment of transition is really a big moment. And so I'm so glad that I get to talk with Melanie, Austin, and Bianca tonight about their transitions and what they've learned over the course of the last year. And so tonight, just a little bit of tonight's flow. We will start with the panelists introducing themselves, and then we'll go into their first how did they get into the field, into kind of the lessons that they've learned towards the latter half of the session. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop in the questions, and then we'll fill them towards the end of the session. And if you have any additional advice, I'm sure the community would love to hear it. So drop those in there too. And I'm just going to do a quick plug. I know that JP Morgan Chase is hiring right now. And so I'm going to drop two links. One is to all our roles, and then there's a link specific to my team. So I'm going to drop that now in case you're interested. But we'll go ahead and get started for the evening. So again, thank you, everyone. So our panelists, would you be able to take yourselves off mute? And I'll just coordinate with names and stuff, but this is a discussion, so feel free to jump in at any time. But I'd love to first just kick off with, can y'all tell us a little bit about yourselves, your role, your company, how long you've been in UX research? Melanie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I can go ahead and start. Again, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, Lena, for the quick introduction and stuff. So as we heard, my name's Melanie. I'm an associate user experience researcher at Usability Sciences, and so I've been there about 13 months. So pretty much everything today will be my true like first year reflections of the industry because I came about like a little bit less than a year right out of grad school. Some part-time stuff in between, but then this is my first true role in this industry. So I'm really excited to discuss all that with everybody today.
Awesome. What about you, Austin?
Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I'm Austin Leslie. I am a UX researcher at Rocket Mortgage. For those of you who don't know what Rocket Mortgage is, if you watch the Super Bowl, the commercial with Barbie and Anna Kendrick, that was us. They are America's largest mortgage lender. I think they did like 300 billion in like mortgage volume last year alone. So the short and sweet of it, if you're looking to buy a mortgage, reach out to me. I can refer you to someone. So I interned at Rocket when I was in college. I graduated from the University of Michigan, go Blue, where I got my degree in UX design. And when I graduated, I returned to Rocket full time. And here I am, ready to share with you guys lovely stories.
And Bianca, what about you?
Hey everyone, I'm really happy to be here. I was in your seat about 13 months ago. So I know what it feels like, and I hope that whatever I share today will help you in your journey. I'm currently a UX researcher at Foot Locker, specifically Foot Locker Digital. So that's anything involving like desktop, web, mobile web, and app. And then also Foot Locker is, a lot of you probably know what Foot Locker is if you've ever bought shoes or clothes, athletic wear, and we're an international brand, but we also are an umbrella for other brands as well. So a lot of the work that I do spans across Foot Action, Kids Foot Locker, Champs East Bay. I just work with a lot of brands often. I've been at Foot Locker for about 13 months as well. So a lot of my reflections will be based off of those 13 months. I still feel very fresh in the field. And prior to that, I was doing some freelance UX design and research work. Prior to that, I actually did a boot camp. So anybody who's done boot camp work, I'm going to talk a lot about that transition. And then before UX design, I have lived a whole life in higher education where I was working with college students around the US. So I'm one of those folks who have gone through a lot of transition as well. And I'm excited to share and be a part of this conversation.
That's awesome. I love hearing everyone's story of how they got into UX research. No path is the same. And it's more power to your past, your experience brings so much more to who you are today. I'd love to, break down, how did y'all actually break into UX research? Maybe Austin, we can start with you and then we'll just shuffle it around a little bit tonight.
Hey, wow. It's actually a really crazy story. I actually have a video on YouTube. If you guys want like the long-winded answer, type in Austin Leslie UX, you'll be able to find it. But about like 3 years ago, I was sitting in Starbucks one day and I was just like going through my playlist and I realized they had taken away one of the features that I really liked. I'm the type of person I like listening to my music over and over again. And so I realized they had took one of the features away to be able to do that. And I was like just sitting in Starbucks like, well, that kind of sucks. Like that was like one of my favorite features. And so I was like thinking to myself, like, wow, who designs the layout and who does the features for something like this? And literally like 3 weeks later, one of my friends at U of M texted me and said, there's a program at U of M called UX Design. And it sounds like something that you were talking about in Starbucks like a few weeks ago. And so the rest was history. And I quickly transferred to that major and I haven't looked back since.
And Bianca, what about you?
Austin, I love that story. I had spent at some point 6 years in higher education. And I felt really stifled in terms of creatively. And I have a bachelor's in creative writing in English. So for anybody who has that background, great way to transition to research too. But I was very much like a book person. I didn't watch much TV. I didn't do much like on the computer. And after 6 years in higher ed, I just woke up one day and I was like, I'm gonna go into tech. Like I had no like direction or reason why, but I was like, this is what I need to do. And I need to make that transition and make it happen. So I spent like a year doing research in different areas of tech. I like did, what are those called? Informational interviews with different types of folks. And I didn't actually speak to a UX researcher, but I did speak to someone who was doing human-centered design. And once I started to understand what that was, I realized that there was an entire field called UX. And I did a little research and realized that's what I wanted to transition into. And there was a lot of, I think, parallel between the work that I did in higher education and the work that I'm doing now in UX research. And that's sort of like what encouraged me. I began to see the similarities. So I just went for it. One day I actually just left my job. I left my job right before the pandemic. It was kind of tragic. But I left my job, and then pandemic happened and I went straight into a boot camp and immersed into UX design. And sort of, you know, that's what propelled me into well, design sort of turned into research once I realized that in my immersive experience, I was more of a researcher. I cared about asking questions. I was very curious. I was like a nerd about presentations and presenting things, and none of my other like teammates were really into that the way I was. So I started to notice that maybe I needed to lean into design. And I sort of went straight for that after my boot camp experience.
Awesome. I just want to call a few things before we move on to Melanie. Like one, you don't have to have a UX background. Like I love that. That is true, right? And so you don't have to be afraid and just, you can go into UX research without having that background and forming it along the way, like finding your learning path towards that. And I think too, the other thing is Bianca and Austin both just showcase a lot of action, right? It's like, let's just do it. We'll figure it out and iterate. And so that's two things that I just want to call out that I love about, you know, what y'all shared. Melanie, I'd love to kind of, you know, learn, how did you break into UX research?
Sure. So I could actually kind of relate to what Bianca was saying about seeing parallels in what you were doing prior to that. So it kind of first started with me when I was finishing up my bachelor's in anthropology, and I took an applied anthropology class. I'm like, oh, I can use this in more ways than I thought, you know, because anthropology, typically the track is you're becoming a professor or, you know, doing field research, ethnography, that type of thing. And so I know I wanted to use it in business in some fashion, but, you know, still kind of seeking that direction. And then so I sought out a graduate school program that focused in business technology and design. And so that program at UNT, and that program was great in providing hands-on opportunities to do different research projects and things. So some, you know, were through classes. So it was kind of like working in pairs, doing individual like interviews, things like that. And then so for my thesis research, that's really where I got the chance to be like, okay, you're gonna, you know, from the ground up, you're going to find a client, you're going to design, you know, a proposal for this project and then run it, you know, start to finish from proposal to presenting the results. And so that experience was just so like confirming for me of like, yeah, I want to do this. This was so interesting to do. I learned so much. It pushed me out of my comfort zone. And so yeah, that was kind of my journey of being like, oh, I see the parallels of like, oh, anthropology, working with people, and you can use those skills in the field of user experience research. And so I just developed that interest in, okay, how can I continue to use anthropology in this field? And so, you know, using the skills of doing anthropological research and the overlap that it has with user experience research.
I love that. I want to iterate two things you mentioned. Like one is seeing what you learned from your past and applying it. There's like so much everyone collectively has. And so I love that you've found ways to kind of move your past experience into what you do today. The other thing that you mentioned is pushing out yourself out of your comfort zone. I think that's something that everyone here like has mentioned to some extent. It's scary, but you kind of went for it. And so I loved Love that spirit. The other thing, now I want to kind of go and to open it up. What, from your perspective, what is the biggest challenges when it comes to stakeholders? We're going to shift to kind of get into, at work where, as your first year in UX research, there's a lot that you'll have to manage through, and stakeholders are a key part. So I'm opening this up to everyone of like, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to working with our stakeholders?
Yeah, I don't mind kicking off answering this question. I think that I'm very lucky at Foot Locker because a lot of the stakeholders that I work with are very excited about research. And in fact, a lot of them believe that some of the work that we do has to start off with research. I think some of the challenges have been sort of educating them on different methodologies of research that are available to them, but also sort of like what it is that I do as a researcher and how I do it versus what they maybe think I do and how I do it. So I think that, yeah, one of the biggest challenges has been education and helping them understand maybe what's appropriate and feasible. What ways can I help them maybe get more involved in the research that I'm doing so that they can get a better sense of why it's being done. And they can have a better understanding of our customers and our users. I also think a challenge is, a large challenge is definitely like establishing timelines that keep UX research in mind. I work across 4 different product paths, and they all have different sort of, I guess, speeds, some of which a lot of the work that we're doing moves very fast, some of it is very slow. And for at least the faster products where things have to turn around very quickly, there's research that wants to be, we want research to be done, but if it's not considered early, it can't be done. Especially with certain testing, it just takes weeks to get done, sometimes months. So if it's not a part of the timeline or the milestone planning, then it often is pushed aside or reprioritized. So yeah, just encouraging like establishing timelines. And I think just having stakeholders think in a less like solution-based way. Like, I think sometimes it's very easy to be like, this is the solution to the problem, or this is the problem, but instead have them reframe what they think the answers are and let them know maybe we don't have them. Maybe we need to be, figuring out what the problem is, going to ask them the right questions to figure out that problem. So sort of like having them reframe how they approach research in that way, and also having them be a little bit more curious and asking questions. Yeah.
All right, great. Awesome. Melanie, do y'all want to add in to anything?
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, Austin, if you had something to say, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say that the biggest thing to realize with UX research is nobody just does UX research just to do it as a job. Like, we all are here right now because we are interested in it and we like it. So with that being said, I would say the tip for dealing with stakeholders is you cannot get married to your design ideas. So when I say that, I mean, there's going to be things you're going to put blood, sweat, tears in, and you're going to really like it, and you're going to think everyone else is going to like it. And there's going to be somebody that's going to come in and they might say, I don't really care for it. And if you take that personal, you're going to find yourself getting offended a lot. So I would say you have to be able to say, okay, they didn't like it. We're going to reiterate and we're going to figure out what they're asking for, and we're going to present that to them. So don't get married. That is my tip. Don't get married to your design ideas because you're going to get hurt a lot if you do.
Yeah, that's a great point. So something that came to mind for me while Bianca was speaking was about like when you're talking about timelines. I think also just adaptability is something that I've had to learn when it comes to those timelines of like, okay, that might have been established, right? But, things change, or, maybe like a prototype you might be testing isn't ready when it was supposed to be ready. And so now, that, okay, the research team has to, you know, prepare for that differently, or might have more of a crunch period than you were anticipating. So I think that's something that over my year in the field so far is something that I've been learning is like, okay, just thinking on your feet, being ready. It's like, okay, we have this timeline, and it's definitely great to prepare that stuff ahead of time, but being ready for not necessarily worst case scenario, but just like contingencies, things that might come up.
I love the theme of like need to be flexible. I know, Bianca, you mentioned up front, research sometimes gets forgotten and we have to figure out the timelines. And so like depending on the methodology and then the question, we can figure out like, how do we best meet that and maintain flexibility. I know I had a couple weeks ago, I had done research and everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I just had to make sure, to get everything back on track. My battery literally died. And so just that flexibility and openness and know that you're going to iterate and learn along the way is so important. And the other thing, I know one thing, just to kind of summarize something Bianca, you and Austin had mentioned, one thing I've heard over and over that I try to live by is fall in love with the problem. So rather than the solution, which I know that a lot of people fall in the solution, is how do you fall in love with the problem? And kind of, if you do that, you there's all the solutions in the world. And so I love that y'all both called that out. And so let's shift now to, when you're running research, what are the biggest challenges you have when it actually comes to running research with research participants? Do you have any fun stories that you might want to share?
I can go. So first thing, when I interned at Rocket, it was right in the middle of the pandemic, and they had me work on Rocket Careers, which is like their career website. So if you want to apply for a job there, that's like the first impression you would get of the company. So I was in charge of interviewing people who were out of work due to COVID. And man, it was like really intense conversations because you're talking to people in like a global, unprecedented situation. They're looking for work. They're hoping to get this job. So I would say the biggest tip I would give is when you're interviewing research participants, you have to break the ice. Like you cannot expect to just sign on to user testing or start an interview and just jump right into it. You need to be able to ask them questions, notice what's in their background, see if you can establish common ground. I know some gentleman I was interviewing at Rocket once, he was from North Carolina. And I asked them, oh, have you been to Myrtle Beach? Like just trying to find that common ground is really, really important. So you have to break the ice.
Something that comes to mind for me is, and this is something that actually came up in our recent project, is kind of like watching what people do versus what they say. Like if you're testing like a prototype or a website or something like that, people may say one thing but do another, or vice versa. And so just the observational skills are important when it comes to working with participants. And obviously this also might tie into like note taking as well, where it's like, it's not just okay, they clicked here, they did this. You might writing down what they say versus what they do, and just kind of keeping track of kind of all aspects of like a session with a participant.
Yeah, and both of you all really made me think about several challenges I've had with research participants. I'm thinking about maybe having conversations with Austin, you were talking to folks who were like looking for jobs during COVID or during the pandemic. And that's a very, I think, hard conversations to have. And I, in working with Foot Locker customers, some of our hard conversations are with folks who are sneakerheads, because there's a lot of exclusivity with our shoes, but it's hard for them to get access. So they're very passionate about sneaker culture, but they're very also passionate about the feedback they have for the way that we either provide them with or don't provide them with sneakers. So sort of navigating like very passionate and very talkative folks, and maybe even like redirecting to make sure that you are having like productive conversations, but also keeping in mind any additional things that come up are helpful as well. So I think, yeah, navigating very passionate or very like vocal participants can be kind of tough, especially if you're interviewing one-on-one. And then also I'm thinking about, you know, like interviewing, specifically like interviewing and maybe just doing remote testing in general, it can be really tough. So I said I came from higher ed, and during that time I did a lot of one-on-ones with students. That was the majority of my work. And it wasn't an interview, but getting to know them and understand what they need and how I could support them was in person. You know, I got the vocal, but I got also the like body language and the emotional response, and sometimes what their feelings felt in the room, you know. So I got all of that in person, but sometimes those things are kind of inaccessible remotely. So I think that's a huge challenge when working with research participants right now. Sometimes you can't get in the room with them, and you have to try your best to sort of interpret what they're saying and how they're feeling via video or call.
And just to piggyback off that, Bianca, that was wonderfully said. I would just encourage everyone to ask themselves, so like when you're having conversations with people, do people typically feel comfortable opening up to you? That is a huge part in this field. So ask yourself that question. And if you can honestly say yes, then you're in the right field.
That's like such a great information, y'all. I want to kind of like summarize a few different things that I heard from you all. Like one, kind of going to what Melanie had said is like what you do versus like it's really what people do, and kind of what a blend of what Bianca said. It's, you know, it's not just what they literally do, it's also the emotional reactions and the other data points that we might need to capture, and finding ways to capture that. Being in UX research, you know, there's more than one data point, and I love that y'all called out the variety of data points that help add more value to our research itself. The other thing is there's such a broad spectrum of research participants, right? We had sneakerheads, we had folks that Austin, you had like tougher conversations with. In terms of what they're going through. But at the end of all of it, y'all are all deeply listening and understanding, reacting to those participants as individuals. And so that's one thing for everyone to kind of take away is, you know, every participant's a little bit different, and being able to adapt and find ways to navigate that situation. You know, and at the end of the day, they're like all people. And so thanks y'all for sharing that. The next question we have up is, you know, how has your kind of going to the future a little bit, how has your experience as a UX researcher influenced where you see yourself in the future?
I can answer that first. I can already let you know that there's not a very clear answer for me. If you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see that I've hopped around in my career, and I'm comfortable with that. But what's like really awesome with being a UX researcher at Foot Locker is that I'm kind of like spread across several product teams. I work with so many people around the world. Sometimes I act like a consultant, sometimes like a stakeholder. Sometimes I'm like in a product, sometimes I'm just kind of like looped into something at the last minute. But I've had a lot of, I think, like just experiences as a researcher, because I haven't had a specialty per se. So I think that because I haven't been relegated to anything particular, I see myself in the future maybe doing that. I noticed that I feel most empowered when I am thinking critically about like our UX research practice, being strategic, being consistent, thinking about how we can like ensure that we have a research repository, that our work is being shared and understood and it doesn't die, which is like a thing in UX research. And tracking and sharing our progress. So these are all things that I know that like I feel really good about. So I'm trying to figure out how I can do more of that in the future. I'm seeing like research strategy or maybe like research operations as a direction for me. But I would also say maybe ask me this in a year, because it might change. And I'm kind of open to it. And I think that in research, it's okay to do that as well, especially in your first like year or 2 or 3, sort of explore and figure out what works for you and what you want to do later.
Awesome. I know we've been going round robin, but y'all don't have to answer the question if you also don't want to. I just want to call that out. Anyone else? And then we can continue to our next question. I know our guests have had a lot of questions too. All right, going to kind of advice you have for others. So what advice would you give someone who is considering UX research as a career?
Well, so something for me, I think would be, I guess I want to talk to maybe a certain type of person that may be considering this as a career. Because I'm somebody who I would consider myself shy. I'm not, particularly extroverted. And so I would like to say for people that might consider themselves the same way, maybe more of an introvert, but find this field interesting, to not be intimidated by the fact that it's very person forward, one-on-one conversations with people and things. I think it's something that it's worth kind of going outside of your comfort zone, because it is such an interesting and engaging field, and it's very rewarding. I guess is the best word for it. Just you get to meet so many different types of people, and the work itself is very rewarding because you get to see changes made to make better products and better things, and make better things for people and make people's experiences better. So that's just one small thing I would like to say for people that might be, maybe intimidated about the person forward aspect of it, is just to pursue it anyway, and like to just try and go outside of your comfort zone.
I would say that if you don't remember anything else I said, I would say remember that UX in theory, UX in school, UX in a perfect world is completely different from UX in the real world, in the working world, in real life. And so what I mean by that is there are things that are going to happen that are going to be outside of your control. There are going to be projects you're going to work on at your job where you're going to make it up to the final hour, and then someone may come in and say, okay, we're scrapping that, we got to repivot, you got to start over. There's going to be drama that might happen with coworkers that you're going to have to be able to not internalize. There's going to be times where, for instance, in school, you're always working with a group, right? Where in the real world, a lot of the times you're solo. It's just you on a project, and you have to be able to advocate for yourself. You have to be able to articulate, this is best practice. This is what I recommend. This is what I prescribe for this project from my research acumen. And those are not always easy conversations to have. So I would just say, get prepared to be uncomfortable, and don't be completely overwhelmed when you start your career and be like, this is completely different from school. This is completely different from the boot camp, because it will be different. But it's not scary. It's just a forewarning so that everyone is prepared.
If you don't mind me jumping back in real quick, because your line about saying be prepared to be uncomfortable just reminded me of a quick story that I had from my my thesis research that I did. And so it was in person, and it was a combination of observation and just kind of quick informal in-person interviews and surveys. And so someone had made a comment, and I had handed them a survey, and I was told, I'm not going to do your job for you, and was handed back my survey. So just to kind of give an example of something that might happen, and you just got to roll with it. So yeah, just kind of go off of what you said, Austin. I think, yeah, that is definitely a great point of be prepared for those types of situations.
I wanted to sort of piggyback off a couple of things too. I think Austin used a word that was, I think, something I knew was important, but didn't realize until I got into the UX research role, and that's advocate. And I think like being prepared to be an advocate is like, that's just something I would encourage you to be prepared for. an advocate for the work that you do as a UX researcher, an advocate for the methodologies you feel that should be employed, an advocate for the users and customers that you're talking to, an advocate for your team sometimes, an advocate for like making everybody just pause and realize that maybe we're going in a really strange direction. So being an advocate is so important, I think, in this role. And then definitely, I think, making sure that you're prepared to be a part of the problem most of the time and not necessarily the solution, which I had to wrap my head around because I came from design, and a lot of designing is about like, you know, creating like a solution to something visually or an interaction. But a lot of research is being a part of the problem, like, you know, discovering the problems and then maybe handing the work off to someone who will create the solution, maybe coming back and testing it later, but you may not be a part of the solution building. And that is something that I feel like researchers or people who are looking to be research need to be aware of.
I love that. I know, Bianca, you also mentioned the word advocate, you, Austin, and I don't know if anyone's watched Hamilton, but you're in the room where it happens, right? You're there to advocate and speak on behalf of those that can't be spoken for. And so, you know, do what you can to advocate for the right methodologies, the right process, the right question, right? Sometimes one thing that you said, Bianca, that I love is, you know, people are sometimes we're going down a strange direction and you're like, hey, that's the actual problem. And we're all the way over here. So I love that you mentioned that. Melanie, I'm also an introvert. And I know that like from personality wise, it doesn't matter if you're introverted or not, because in the end of the day, how I frame in my mind is you're here to help others, right? At the end of the day, we're here to help others. And so that's something that I can get behind, even though like I get more energy just like working through myself. But that is one thing that, you know, you don't have to be an extrovert to be a UX researcher, but you're there to advocate for those that you talk to and that you represent. And so I'm going to start switching us now to some of the questions that our our guests have asked. So y'all, what do you think made you successful during your first year as a UX researcher?
I can go. Lots of prayer. No, I'm joking, but seriously, yeah. I would say soft skills really helped. So the ability to have conversations with people, the ability to be able to advocate and speak up for yourself in a respectful way, not a disrespectful way, is so important. Because when you're disrespectful, people don't even listen to what you're saying. You have to know how to do it in a professional, composed way. I'll leave it at that, soft skills.
I think during my first year of experience, it was not being afraid to ask questions of like my coworkers. So like the other more experienced researchers, I like learned such a crazy amount of things from people, even just in the first couple months, like the first couple projects that I worked on. Everybody was so, I mean, I guess it helps to have, you know, great coworkers, of course, but everybody was just so helpful and just you learn so many like little things along the way, right? It kind of goes back to that topic we were talking about earlier about how, you know, coming out of school, it's going to be different once you get started. And so that's something that definitely happened to me. But just being ready to ask those questions about like, okay, so what do we do in this situation if this comes up while you're moderating, or like, okay, you send out this report, but they send it back and like, okay, they want us to make these changes. Is that okay? You know, and so just not being scared to be like, okay, am I supposed to know this already? It's like, no, just ask the question. So that's something that I think was valuable to me in my first year.
That's such a good one. The asking the questions part, I think, are essential. And I think my first like month or two, I was so nervous about asking silly questions or maybe like stupid questions that I didn't. And then I realized once I started to, I felt more comfortable in everything that I was doing. So that's a really good point. For me, it would have to be, I was thinking definitely failure. Like I was just horrible in the beginning, y'all. Like my first presentation that of findings was, I thought it was brilliant and people gave me great feedback. But my second one, oh my goodness, I was nervous. I didn't feel confident about what I was doing. I just got a lot of brain fog because I was so nervous. But after that failure, I was like, well, I can't do any worse than this now. So from that point forward, I was like, well, I can only go up. But I think failing early, like failing fast, and then recuperating and learning from that, and then moving forward is really important in research. Oftentimes we research and we just don't have, like, the answers aren't really there. You know what I mean? Like we might find things, but they're not useful. And that's not necessarily failing, I would say, but that might mean you reevaluate the questions you're asking. And so I think, yeah, failure for me and resilience was my the way that I was successful. And then also like just getting a lot of feedback, because I don't know how you all feel about working remotely as a researcher, but I get in my head a lot. And then I'm like, does this make sense? Should I even do this approach? What if we can't make this work? And then the second I just ask for someone to hear, my plan and to give me feedback on it, whether it be a researcher or a designer or a product manager, that's when I start to, it starts to make sense to me. So, yep.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. A few things I want to reiterate. Melanie, if you mentioned just like it's essentially staying curious. I know one thing anytime I start a new role, you're just trying to figure stuff out, and you might ask a question that someone else wants to ask, but they just don't ask it. And so you're actually providing more of a service to to other people beyond yourself. So don't be afraid to stay curious and ask those questions. And Bianca, I love your mention of failure. Like there's so much as researchers, I think tend to be the most self-reflective in figuring out, what did we do wrong? What do we need to improve? And so I love that call out. I know in the morning, I try to journal and figure out, okay, what could I have done better, and reflect holistically on what I can do to improve myself. And then after every study, it's figuring those things out too, because there's always ways to improve or like remove bias. So you're constantly assessing yourself. The other thing I want to mention is I know that what I do to reduce failure for studies is I'll actually run a pilot study. And so I'll start with an internal team, and then I'll maybe run one pilot study to figure out what works, what doesn't. Sometimes a prototype messes up. Other times we're asking the question maybe a leading way and you're able to catch that. But running pilots also helps you reduce that risk. That way your team can really maximize the insights you're able to pull out. Another question we have from our guests are, what are some of the resources that you used through your first year as a UX researcher?
User testing. I use that a lot. Affinity diagramming. It's one of my favorite things about this field. Get used to doing that. Rosebud thorn template. If you guys haven't heard of it, I would encourage you after this call to look it up. That's something that has fared very well with stakeholders for me. I actually had an experience a week ago. I was giving a presentation to business stakeholders, and she said, "Oh, I use a Rosebud thorn template with my kids at dinner. That's the only time they talk to me." And she loved my presentation. So.
We also use user testing for everything. I guess also we use this resource called Baymard Institute, which is it can be very helpful, but sometimes maybe not so much because they don't update their resources or their studies that often. Essentially, this institute does regular UX, UI studies for major e-commerce companies in the US. So they have benchmarks, and Foot Locker is one of them. So that's nice to see how we sort of compare against other companies. And it's great for secondary research, which I actually do a lot of as a researcher. Outside of those internal tools, I also use oh shoot, ADP list. This is just like if you're looking for like a mentor or like someone to talk to in the field, ADP list is really nice because you can talk to several UX researchers around the world, I think. And that was really helpful for me in my first year. But if you're looking to get into UX research, it can be helpful in general. I'm trying to think about what other things I use. Yeah, I might have to think about that. I don't know if we're gonna follow up, but I would be fine with like sharing more research sources later.
Yeah, for sure, Bianca. If you guys have any resources to share, just send them to us and we'll post them on our website.
Cool. One thing one thing I just want to reemphasize, I love that Bianca called out secondary research. We like in a lot of the stuff you see out there, it really focuses on just like running your own research. But remember that there's secondary research. There's other people, there's other mounds of information that has been validated and is very powerful. And it kind of puts a lot of it puts a lot more power underneath you. So like different stakeholders will have different ways that work better for them and how they approach things. Some want like more data, others want more qual, like everyone wants a little bit different. So those secondary resources would definitely will help add power to your tool belt. And the other thing, Austin, that you mentioned was rosebud thorn. A great other thing is, as a researcher is all the tool, like what's in your toolkit. So learning different frameworks, different ways to think about things is super helpful. And you can just kind of pull out what works best in each scenario. This is more like one resource I know that I really appreciate is, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Indy Young, but she had a session that I took called listening deeply. And it was really like at the end of the day, it's like just listening to people. And as I looked at it, I could see a lot of applications to just daily life. And so that I think was also a really great resource in just truly understanding people. But we'll be sure to get the resources from our guests, and then we'll be able to post that up. Bianca, you had someone had a question on, they wanted to know what boot camp you went to. Could you tell us about the boot camp a bit?
Yeah, so I did a General Assembly UX design immersive boot camp that was actually supposed to be in person. But again, I started right at the peak of COVID in 2020. So we ended up doing it remote. It was UX design focused. There were parts of it that was about UX research, and every project that we did involved research. So it was, even though it wasn't about UX research, it was sort of, it informed the work that we did in the program. I'm trying to think about what else is helpful to know about it. It's a lot of collaborative work, which is helpful. You work with a client, which I think is nice in comparison to other bootcamp opportunities. And mine was 3 months. Mine was 3 months, 9 to 5. So I was not playing games. 3 months, 9 to 5, yeah.
Awesome. I'm organizing our information here. We have a question from the guest on what was the hardest part of interviewing that helps you succeed in interviews? Oh, sorry, what was the hardest part of interviewing, and then what helped you ultimately succeed in the interviews?
I can go. I would say, so when I was doing my interviewing process, I was under the assumption that people want to walk away from that interview feeling like you know everything. That's not always the case. What I found was the interviewer is asking themselves, can I see myself working with you? Would you be a delightful person to be around? Those are really the questions they're asking about you in the interview. But that's not to say you still don't need to be very knowledgeable about UX research, because you do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I had a similar experience where I could tell that was kind of some of the questions they asked. And also I interviewed with like the research team that was part of the interview process. So it would be the people that I would be working directly with on projects. And so like one question I was asked, that was like, kind of like after you get some of the more serious questions out of the way, it's like, oh, do you have any pets? And it's just getting to know someone as a person. And it's like, if you're going to be spending 9 to 5 with them, some days, like if you're doing like an intense project together, you want to know if you can get along with them. So that is a part of the interview process that does come up of just, do you get along with people? Obviously, like you said, skills are important too, but yeah, something to anticipate as part of the process.
I think for me, the hardest part was helping people make sense of the direction that I wanted to go in, which was UX research, even though I was coming from like a design boot camp and I had freelance experience in research and like design. So really like, I didn't really learn the language of helping people understand that like research informed the work that I do. Regardless of the work that I was doing. So I think once I was able to like help people see that, like I was doing research in everything, no matter what I was doing, then I felt a little bit more, I guess, confident, and that helped me in my interviewing.
Awesome. I love it. We're going to shift back into your work, your day-to-day work. And so we had a question on what are the top 3 research methodologies that you use most frequently?
So the cool part about working at Usability Sciences is we do lots of different things. And so that changes month by month of what I'm working on and things. So over the past year, I've gotten to do lots of different stuff like, try benchmarking or just like really quick, like fast turnaround usability studies where it's just like within 48 hours, it's like, here's some bulleted findings kind of thing, or maybe something a little bit more long-term over a couple of weeks. So I guess I don't really have a top 3, but so just it's been a little bit of everything really in my current experience, which is part of what I enjoy about usability sciences is getting that different experience of doing all these different types of research and seeing what they entail.
I feel like, yeah, my experience is very similar to yours, Melanie. I've done a little bit of everything. When I first started though, I did a lot of secondary research. And that secondary research kind of like transformed into more of like a mixed methods where I could determine if I wanted to do secondary surveying and also like some sort of like interviews and conversations with folks. But I think I've gotten a good mix of things. And now it also depends too, I think, on the quarter and like where you are in the scope of whatever product you're a part of, which makes sense because I started in Q1 or like the tail end of Q4. So a lot of secondary research was supporting some of the decisions that our product managers were making for our milestones. And right now I'm doing a lot more like usability testing and evaluative work to see if some of the work that we've created is effective.
I would say, so the first thing is I keep like a running backlog or like a running dossier of all my work. And so the translation is don't have a million tabs open thinking you're just going to minimize it and open it up the next morning and be able to find everything quickly. Like, no. So keep an organized backlog of everything you're working on. Miro is the industry standard. I would play around in that because that's where you're going to do your affinity diagramming. That's where you're going to do the rosebud thorn template, etc. And then user testing, being able to just play around with that too and understanding how to set up tests, how to write kind of the script for the test, and just finding out about the nifty features. It's going to come in handy.
All right, awesome. It sounds like in general, when it comes to UX research method, it just really depends. Like there was a variety of responses. And so it's a matter of like where you are, what you want to learn, and then also how much time you have might shift your approach when it comes to the tools that you have in your toolkit. And so we're going to go into now. So one of the questions that we have is around converting your findings into insights. So how do y'all go around translating your insights into actionable suggestions or recommendations?
I can go. So I always ask myself when I'm doing my work, I usually give it a night to sleep on it. And then I come back and I ask myself, does this make sense? So if I do not have a design background, if I'm not coming from UX research, would I be able to understand this? And would I care about the recommendation that I'm reading? So just put yourself in the other person's shoes and ask yourself, does this make sense? And would I care?
Yeah, Austin, I think that's like the quote of the day right there is just if I'm not in this field, does this make sense externally? Would somebody be able to interpret what I'm saying? And I think that's like, once everything's written out, your final report, your results, whatever it is your deliverable is, that's like that last thing that you want to run by yourself is like, okay, would I get this if I was somebody else who didn't know about this? And then also, I guess, just to kind of give a little bit about my own experience in my role, we tend to work in teams, and so I think that's part of the process. Part of my process is kind of working with the other person, making sure we heard the same things, we interpreted. We're not just making up things in our head, or might have because it's natural to like latch onto something that you find interesting, or it's like, oh, that's the way I interpreted this part of the website as well. So then you kind of maybe think you saw something more often than it actually happened. So communicating with team members is a big part of coming up with analysis and results for me.
And for me, I feel like I'm always trying to make sure that I'm telling a story for those who are like listening and involved. Because I sort of like work with so many teams and so many different stakeholders, I have to be very mindful about who I'm sharing my findings with, like what it is they understand or don't understand about the product that I am doing research on. And also like who, oftentimes my findings come with next steps recommendations. So thinking about who will be involved in next steps, thinking about the scope of the project and what is realistic and what's not. And if it's going to be designers, like thinking about like what their next steps can be, or if it's product managers reassessing, the timeline, what that looks like, or if it's stakeholders who are not in product at all, like what next steps actually look like to them. So I just, telling a story for those who are involved and who are listening, I think is how I sort of determine how I'm going to present my findings.
Awesome. I love the theme of really it's like know your audience, right? Who you're talking to, will they care? In the end, like what's the decision they're trying to drive forward? Is it, or is it a pivot? Is this a product that will work? Is it, is it design updates? Does this language make sense? So it goes back to, knowing your audience, what they're looking for, and being able to answer that question directly. So our next question that we have was around academia. So coming from academia to the field of UX research, are there any books you would recommend for someone new to the field to get familiar with industry research terminology?
There's a cool website called lawsofux.com. That's just, it walks you through different design principles and things you can think about when you're designing experiences. There's a lady, her name is Jamie Levy, and she has a book, I think it's called UX Strategy. That's a really good book to look into because it draws on UX, but it also draws on business language and being able to marry the two. That's what I can think of off the top of my head.
I actually just ran off to go grab mine, but here's one that I would recommend. And again, everybody from Usability Sciences that is watching, I read this during my first month when I started. But yes, it's called Don't Make Me Think. So that is definitely what I would recommend.
I have a list on my personal computer. Like my mind is blanking on all the books, but I have a list and I would love to share once I get the access to that. So I'm sorry, I can't think of like, I know there's even one that's like how to think like a researcher or something like that. I'm so sorry, y'all. I have a list I would love to share at some point.
Send it to us. We'll share it with everybody. I know how that goes.
I was also trying to find my book. There was a book called, I think the one you might be referencing, Bianca, is it Think Like a UX Researcher?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so let me take a look at our other questions. So we had a question on this is we talked at the very beginning of the session about, we all are in lots of moments of transition, especially if you are shifting from one to into UX research. So for those transitioning from other fields, especially indirect care, how can we help others understand those transferable skills we already possess? So I know, Bianca, you mentioned higher education. Melanie, like, you come from anthropology. And so like, how do you transfer the skills you already have? How do you make the case and move it into your roles today?
So regarding making the case, because I feel like that's kind of a two-part question, right? So making the case versus, okay, how I'm actually doing it. And so when it comes to making the case, I believe part of it is making that initiative of showing like, here, I've done this before, right? So like while I was in graduate school, I tried to, I took an online course in which you had to kind of go out and do a project. And so I tried to use my anthropology skills. I worked with a local shop they were holding some video game tournaments. And so trying to get, feedback on what people wanted from the tournaments, how can they maybe improve, things like that. And so try to use anthropological skills while doing UX research. So that way I had something demonstratable to be like, look here, I've done this before. So that's something that I try to do, is take that initiative. So that way I have something to present to be like, okay, here, I have proof. This is how this has been done. And so to address the second part of the question about like, okay, how I'm doing it now. A lot of the skills, some are just straight up the same, right? When it comes to, like best practices when it comes to interviewing and things. And some I've had to adapt, I've had to change. I think one of the biggest ones comes to report writing. And I saw in the chat earlier, a couple people mentioned, anthropological backgrounds as well. So I think that's pretty cool. But one thing that I found different is when it comes to presenting deliverables and things, a need for succinctness that wasn't present before when it came to anthropology. A lot of anthropological writing is very long form. There's actually this thing called thick description, which is what it sounds. It's writing very, very detailed and very, very long, right? And so in UX research, a lot of it is, okay, what was the most important things I saw? Because, your stakeholder only has 10 minutes to read your report, or something along those lines. So I think that was a big adaptation I had to make, of like, okay, so kind of taking my writing and making it more succinct, more direct, while still having those supporting examples and supporting evidence of what happened in a session while talking with users.
I think that I felt like what I really did was I took a fine-tooth comb through like all of my experiences and was like, what is it that I've done in these experiences that feels transferable? And how can I tell a story about those experiences that would show that I could be, a UX researcher in whatever space that I'm interviewing for. I know that for me, I feel like what the transferable skills that worked really well were a lot, like I talked about, doing like one-on-one conversations with students and people, and so a lot of the like active listening, but also I thought about it even more. I was doing case management. So I would meet with students, but then I was writing these detailed notes about our interactions, and then I would go and meet with a group of folks. And then we would talk about, what are next steps after you know, after meeting with this person and seeing these notes. And then I would have these notes over time. So I essentially like am creating like a data about said student. I think that like when I really think about the experiences that are transferable, but then like think about how I would go even further and think about like how it can relate to the research, UX research experience. I'm trying to think about I even brought it back to, so I went to grad school for higher education, and it wasn't the same type of research, but I did a lot of secondary research in my grad school experience. So I was able to speak to that, to coming up with writing long papers about students, essentially, and doing heavy research about them. I was able to speak to that experience, which was great because I did a lot of secondary research at Foot Locker. I led a lot of workshops and events for students and for people in the wellness community. At some point, I was like doing wellness stuff in a former life. I was able to speak to that too. So I think there's just so many different things that can be transferable. You just really need to sit down and pick them apart and think about the experiences you've had in the past, even beyond the working experiences or the school experiences you've had. And I think that they can be transferable skills.
Thank you so much for sharing, y'all. Bianca, you had so much richness in like, it's essentially a lot of self-reflection, right? And just thinking back to your past and then digesting it down. And Melanie, I hear you on the succinctness. You're right. Like a lot of times our stakeholders have, you know, we have a 30-minute meeting planned and it comes down to like 5 or 10 minutes. And so that succinctness becomes so important. And so kind of, we're going to shift to kind of the world of when you're starting your portfolio. We had a question from the audience around how important is a portfolio for landing your first UX job. I've heard conflicting advice from it's essential to you're not a designer, you don't need one. What are your thoughts here?
This is a hard question. I don't know if you all feel the same way, but it's a hard question because in some spaces I feel like it's not that important, in others it really is. In my experience, every place that I applied to, I had to have a portfolio, especially for UX research positions. I had to have it, whether it was like a website or a PDF. Like sometimes PDFs of case studies are good enough. But I do believe that me presenting a case study during one of my interviews for Foot Locker was a make or break for me, because in my interview, I showed a presentation that I put together. Like they wanted me to actually like show, do the case study during the interview. And because of that, they were like, wow, you do actually put these things together well, and you told the story really well. And this person was impressed by how I went about putting together findings. So it's a really tough, I think this is a tough question. It's a hard one, but I would say that like at least having case studies to share seemed to be important in my search.
Yeah, so like there's a saying, the proof is in the pudding. In this case, your portfolio is the proof. So I would recommend it, but the tip I would give when you're making your portfolio, try to tell a story. So remember we were all in elementary school, they used to teach us how books are written. There's the climax and there's the ending. That's the type of thinking I would have when I'm making my portfolio. Don't just throw a whole bunch of stuff on there and say, I did this, 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 look, ooh, it's shiny. Like take them through, start to finish. And I will also say I interned at Rocket, but I still had to have a portfolio for my full-time interview.
And then one thing I just want to append, one thing that I had started doing was, because we tend to forget. And so I just like keep a spreadsheet of just like, you know, what's the situation? What did I do? So I just have a trigger, like I have a memory of it, because we tend to just be so bad as humans at remembering. And so, so yeah, like that's just something that you should always just do, because in general, if you just want to have those stories ready. I know one theme that I've heard over and over in this conversation is just on storytelling. You've mentioned you all have mentioned it in various responses, and so I just want to get a sense from you is, how do you tell that story when you're presenting, to stakeholders? What's your process and how you go about doing that?
I would say always showcase what you did and how you made something better, but also be able to explain how you navigated roadblocks. Because think about from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, think how many things just go wrong that you just didn't plan for. That's going to happen in projects. So I would say be able to articulate how you overcame that and navigated that, but also don't start with negative from the jump. Make sure you're telling them, I made this experience better. Here's what happened along the way. This is how I overcame it. Look at the result.
Yeah, that last part that you mentioned is kind of what I wanted to bring up as well, of just balancing like, okay, here's, some negatives we might have run into while, exploring your site, product, whatever it is. But also, that this part was successful, or, they had a positive experience with this, or weren't expecting to get this, but they got this and we're happy about it. So I think that's something to take into consideration. Is just the kind of that balance of like, okay, maybe this session we might have had like they ran into some issues, but there were a couple of positive things here or there.
And I think to sort of add to what you all are saying is I think trying to, especially if you're like talking to users and customers, trying to like humanize them is really important, because I think that sometimes with research, it's easy to forget that part because you're just collecting data and you're putting things together, trying to make sense of stuff. But I try really hard to humanize their experience, but also like let folks see a part of it. So any opportunity I have to like insert audio or insert video or, something to sort of like help people see, helps me tell the story a little bit better. And it helps them understand sort of like, why, and a better understanding of like the insights that I've shared.
Yeah, I think that's like essential in some cases, because it's one thing hearing it from us, but it's another thing just hearing it directly from the person. Like, it's like saying, okay, just to give a website as an example, it's like, okay, your site kind of broke here. It's one thing, again, hearing it versus like, oh, okay, it broke. It happened. Here's how this person reacted to it. So yeah, that kind of more tangible stuff, like you were saying, of like a video or an image, I think is very useful.
And also to add to that, there's like a little bit of a cheat code to tell a story or to sort of get buy-in, as well as if you incorporate like people who are, I guess, a part of your team as a part of the research. So if you have them like sit in on interviews or be a note taker and they see it firsthand, when you're presenting, they'll be like, oh yeah, I was there for that. And that was crazy. Or like, I totally see why we were going in this direction and the problems that our customers are having. So you telling the story, but also like having somebody else help you tell the story is really helpful too.
I love that. It's so true. Like research is a team sport, and it also helps reduce bias. And so I love that, like bringing in other people see things from different perspectives through their different lenses. And so I so appreciate that and the importance of storytelling. So we're kind of going to shift gears real quick. I know earlier, someone had mentioned that sometimes you're just advocating for UX research, and depending on the stakeholder, it can really vary. But if you were to have a 2-minute elevator pitch, if someone asked you, what is UX research and why is it important? What would you say? And for anyone that's out there that's like completely new, what would you tell them?
That's actually a great question. Go on YouTube, type Austin Leslie UX. How I got my job at Rocket Mortgage was because I gave a pitch at the career fair at my school. And that video that's on YouTube is everything I said in that pitch at the career fair. And that's what landed me the job. there's a visual in there explaining UX very easily. There's questions that you need to be asking when you embark on a project that I explained in the pitch. That got me the job. So I would say watch that.
All right. We had a question around basically education, having to go to like school versus not for UX research. So someone had shared, how do you feel that going to the college route is beneficial as opposed to the online route in the long run when it comes to UX research?
Well, I think what we've seen today is that, everybody comes from different, is coming to the field with different backgrounds and things. And I think that's so cool, like on this panel that we're kind of seeing a cool example of that. And also just seeing how, among the three of us, our roles are very different, but we're all in the same field, striving towards similar things. And so I think it's just not a very helpful answer, but it comes down to it depends on what you want to do, what you feel like, what kind of skills you want to learn, what areas you're interested in. So I don't feel like there's a definitive answer to that question. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of doing the research of what you want to do, what interests you. I think is what it comes down to, because just to go on a slight tangent, I feel like that's what I love about this field is just just the sense of curiosity that it brings about, of just like, oh, it's interesting to me. And I think you got to find what areas are interesting to you and, find the path that helps you pursue that.
Yeah, and to sort of add to that, I think that well, at least for me, I had to really figure out who I was as a learner, as someone who was going to make a transition. And I knew that I had already been to school for undergrad and grad, so I wasn't going to do that again. But I also knew that I had to be immersed into an experience like this in order for me to commit. Like I knew I had to drop everything and just focus. And for some people, they don't have to do that. Some folks can continue what they're doing and then, learn on their own. There's plenty of UX researchers who are self-taught. Some folks take boot camps or courses after work or while they're in school. Some people are going the school route because that's how they learn best and they feel that that's most beneficial. So I think it's really about like knowing who you are and what it is that you need in order to learn about UX research. And at the end of the day, you're going to need, everybody can take different paths, I think, to sort of educate themselves, but there are core things that you're going to need, like mentorship, networking, some sort of experience, like hands-on experience that you're going to need to get regardless of the path that you take. So yeah, it depends on what you feel you need.
I love that. Like from the hands-on experience to, every case is so unique. I personally did not go to school for UX research. I had the fortune of, starting at Intuit, learning design thinking. I got to take a class with Steve Portugal and like on interviewing and stuff. And so mine was more scrappy of how I learned, but I learned all the gaps along the way, lean into mentors, books, resources to build my knowledge and constantly assess. I know research is very methodical, and now I'm pursuing a master's in HCI. It's just more something I want to do. It's not that I have to, but I really appreciate and want to better understand, my potential biases that I have and everything. And so it's something that I'm doing on the side, but school, I don't think is necessary. Everyone here has had such a diverse background. We have people that come from academia, people that took boot camps, people that are trained at a school in HCI. And so it's not necessary, but you just have to evaluate. I think Bianca said it well, is you have to evaluate your own situation and figure out, if what's the right fit for you, and then in your current situation. I know we've gone probably a bit over our general time, but this was such a great conversation. I've learned so much from y'all, Austin, Bianca, and Melanie. This was so great. Are there any other last words or nuggets of wisdom you would like to part amongst our entire audience tonight, or this morning or afternoon? Or words of encouragement too.
I think for me, since, this was about like first year reflections and things we learned in the first year, just to kind of reiterate what I said before about like just ask questions, especially like, if you're working with people that, they've been doing it for a little bit. Just don't be afraid to ask those questions. And yeah, it is going to be such a learning process of just like little things that you experience working on different projects and things about like, okay, this project I learned, what to do in this kind of situation if this happens um, with a participant, or just like little things where it's like, well, I never thought that would happen, but now I know what to do in this situation. Where there comes to like, you're doing a remote session, you have a tech issue, it's like, okay, I'll prepare for that next time. So I think that's a big part. That's been a big part of my first year, is just learning what to prepare for, and what skills I'm missing, I guess, too, is another thing of like, okay, I know I want to, learn this skill, or, try to seek out doing this type of project because I haven't done this before, or those kinds of things. So learning what I'm missing, and then also just if a question does come up, making sure I ask it.
And I just want to say to, especially the folks who are like trying to transition into the field and maybe not from an adjacent or seemingly adjacent field, that it can be hard, but like continue to push through it and think critically about the experience that you want as a researcher. And then if you need to go out and get hands-on experiences that align with that. Like I did a lot of freelance work, a lot of like non-paying work. I did an internship and I felt kind of weird because I was like an older person in an internship. I did a design challenge, never thought I would do. And all of those things helped me speak to different aspects of the current jobs that I have right now. So if you are transitioning, like do everything you can to get some hands-on experience and try to make it in alignment with what you're looking for. Yeah, you got this. And also thank you to the other panelists. I've learned a lot today too, and I appreciate you all sharing, and hopefully we can connect at some point again later. And to everyone else, like, love to connect on LinkedIn.
Bianca, I just wanted to kind of second something that you said about like the hands-on experience, because just reflecting on like my job searching experience, like kind of in between school and my current role, I think that was a big thing that I noticed. And I feel like somebody might have mentioned that in the chat before, earlier towards the beginning of that. It seems like everything just wants like, okay, however many years of experience or whatever, but seeking out like, these online courses or just any other ways you can get something hands-on, broaden your knowledge and show like, yeah, I might not, be doing this for 5 years already, but I know some things, I'm eager to learn. I think that's a key part just starting out.
All right, I'm going to leave y'all with one thing. If you're just considering transitioning in, one thing I did is I did a diary study on myself. So this might be a hands-on experience. When I was debating if I should transition into UX research, what I did is over a course of a month, I don't know if y'all bullet journal, but I bullet journaled. I used to. I created a grid for every day of the month, and I just colored in every day how I felt. Red for good days, red for like not great days, black for just bleh days, and then green for like happy days. And then over the course of a month, I just was auditing like what made me feel like green, what gave me energy, what took away energy. And the biggest thing for me was I collected quantitative and qualitative data to assess myself. And it helped me come to the decision of I needed a UX research. And so that was what got me to go over the hump. And I know like, the other thing is no matter where you are in life, age shouldn't matter. I just want to call that out specifically because there's just times where you're like, you have these barriers, but they're barriers you create for yourself. So just be sure to collect the data you need to make the decision yourself, because in the end, it's personal. And so I just want to call that out. I knew for me, it was so scary because I was going from product to UX research. And so I just want to call it out that, personally as a product manager, to a UX researcher, I love UX research. I get to empathize with people more. Not that product managers don't, I just get to do it more. So I just want to like call that out as a don't be afraid. And all our panelists mentioned, the flexibility, you just got to go for it. And then test it out, right? We're iterating, learning throughout life. And so I just want to call that out. But Austin, Bianca, Melanie, thank you so much. We learned so much from y'all tonight. And then to UX Research and Strategy for hosting this session. It was so great to be able to talk to y'all.
Thank you so much, Leda. This was fantastic. And Bianca, Austin, and Melanie, thank you as well. You guys imparted tons and tons of knowledge. I've been watching the chat all night long. Everybody is just consuming it. So thank you so much. If you guys have any other resources that you talked about tonight, please send them our way. We'll put them up on our website and share them with everybody for sure. So what we're going to do now is, this is the portion of the evening where we transition into our networking part. So you guys are welcome to stick around, our panelists, but you don't have to. If you need to jet, you can go. As well as everybody else. Please stay if you'd like to. And how we do with this is we are going, so I'm going to start the recording again. And so for those of you who have come to our events before, this is the happy hour portion. And so for those of you who haven't been here before, this is the portion of the evening where if you've got a question, have we got some answers, or we're going to take a good stab at it. So if you've got any questions related to UX research or strategy or careers in the space, anything at all, just use your reaction button to raise your little hand icon, and what it'll do is it'll put it in the top corner for me so I know who has a question, and then I can call on everybody and nobody gets left out, and because I can only see so many people at one time. So if you've got any questions, let me know.
And anybody can answer,
Yeah,
not just us. So please, everyone chime in. Everybody has a great perspective, so feel free to answer any questions that come up. Don't be shy.
yeah.
No, there are no bad questions.
Nope. Rupika, what's your question?
Hey everyone, my name is Rupika. So my question is about quantitative research methods. And so I'm wondering how often folks use such methods, and like what kind they use, like what kind of like statistical knowledge like you should have like going into a role. Does it depend on like whether the role is like a qualitative role, or like if you use mixed methods? Sorry, this is like 3 or 4 questions, but yeah.
So who's used quantitative methods and what do you do with it? Just feel free to take yourself off mute if you got an answer or some experience you want to impart. Oh, Fayolite, we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Don't know why.
Hi. Yeah.
Oh,
What did you say?
now we can. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Viola, and I have used quantitative methods, and the way in which I have approached it in the past, although I'm still, I see every situation as another way for me to learn, but from my past experience, it depends on what I'm really trying to solve and what type of group I'm working with. I mean, certain times I might just be going in terms of qualitative. It might just be terms of going in and just trying to find out who are my users and what are their issues, and let me speak with them. But then I might want to, after that, see, okay, well, based on the group of people I've spoken with, how many are thinking about it in this way, or how many have this situation. So I base it depending upon what it is I'm trying to find out, what is the particular project I'm on. Like many times I'm working with products, and many times I'm working with people who either are getting a new product, or they're getting something that's enhanced, and trying to figure out, well, what can we do to make it better? Or it might be something at the end of a project where after they have gone through, we've ruled it out and we want to get their reactions. And so we might want to get a number of people. So it really depends on what it is, in my case, what I found, what it is that I'm trying to find, and what makes the best sense in order to get that information to help my team to know, what's the feedback, what's the response. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that does. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Kinsey, you've got a question.
Yeah, I was curious about what the difference, what it's like working in for a particular company that has products that they market as it compared with a consulting firm that works with companies and as consultants. And I know you all are working for companies right now, but I wonder if you have a sense of that.
I haven't worked for a company, but like a consulting company before, but I will say generally the sense I get is like it hurts more when you work for a company and your recommendations aren't taken, but when it's a consulting company, if they don't take your recommendations, you just don't know unless like it's public facing. But I can't say like how it is working in each of them, but I can say that it just hurt more when your recommendations aren't taken. So I can just speak to that because you see the impact. And then if something there's an issue down the line, you're like, I told them to fix that, but they didn't. So I'll just speak to that because I haven't actually worked in an agency. But I thought I'd share that because that's one thing that I like generally that I know can exist.
It's so true. So true. So I worked at Usability Sciences, the same place Melanie is at today. And the biggest difference is that your engagement at an agency is very short, whereas your engagement when you're at a company and you're not in a centralized model, which is basically an internal agency, when you're distributed amongst the different teams. So you're part of a design and product team who is working towards a specific goal. When you're at an agency, you're turning and burning. Time is money, and you better make more of that time, more of that money. And so we had a cadence of 3 weeks for a project, 1 week to prep, 1 week to do it, 1 week to write the report. That last week you're writing the report, you're actually also prepping for the next test. So that doesn't leave a lot of time to get deep into the problems for the business, to understand why they're doing this project. The salespeople got to talk to them about that when I was there. And so you kind of got a little bit of the context, but you really just got a good understanding of what you were here to do. Versus when you're at a company and you're embedded with a team, you get to have a place at the table with them to talk about strategy, talk about how they can take what you find from the research and put it into practice. Versus an agency, you're writing a report, you're giving a presentation, and you send your baby out to the world and you hope that they do something that you've told them to do. Those are the big differences that I have seen. Has anybody else had any other different experience?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. So I actually have not worked at an agency, but I asked the same question when I was thinking about doing a career change. And really interesting point that was mentioned to me was agency is amazing for breadth of industry. You're working on, it never gets boring, right? Lots and lots of different projects. Now, surprisingly, when this person said he decided to make the switch, he wanted to move over and become a product researcher, he said it was actually a little bit difficult for him with the storytelling, because at an agency, you make the recommendation, but you can't actually see what was the business impact of it unless you have this continuing relationship with your customer. But in his particular case, he said, you create your recommendation, you hand it off, and you don't know what happens after that. And oftentimes with the storytelling, it's all about the business impact. So that was a very surprising finding about that. But on the flip side, I would, and Lori, I'd love to hear from your experience. I would imagine that at agency, you don't have to worry about that advocacy so much because you have customers coming to you and you're just doing the actual research. So if advocacy and program building is not your thing, maybe agency is more for you.
You do have to still advocate because you want them to come back and spend more money. So that's a different kind of advocacy than internal to try to build your research team, right? And the practice, you're wanting them to come back. So you're always looking for more opportunities. You're listening for some of those words in the conversation with them about other things that the salespeople might be able to sell them on, other methods, longer term engagements, things like that. So it's a little bit different in that as well. But you're always selling. As a UX researcher, you are always selling. Who else has any questions? Rebecca, what's your question?
Hi, sorry. My question's a little bit different, but how is the work-life balance as a UX researcher? I'm a parent, so I want to know, is this something that I can do? I'm sure everyone's answers are going to vary, but yeah, that's my question.
It is what you make of it. I know during the pandemic, I was sucked into work a lot. You're already on the computer, just sink another hour or two in, or just, the weekend, I've got nothing to do, so I'll just work, So it shouldn't be so time consuming that your life is gone. It really shouldn't. And if it is, then that might not be the place for you. That's my opinion.
Yeah, Jen, 100%. We're not saving lives. We're not doctors. We shouldn't be working all the time. But what you might find is that different companies have different philosophies. Some people will squeeze you until you cry, and then they'll squeeze you some more, and then you have to leave. Some places will be understanding. Oh, do you need to go and take someone to a doctor appointment? Perhaps it's yourself. Please go. It just depends on the place that you've landed. So what I always like to tell people is, when you're thinking about a career, you're thinking about a career change, a new job, be introspective as to like, what is important to you? What are the things that you find valuable in others? You will find the same things valuable in companies. They're not people, but you will find the same things. So if you value humanity, what does that look like? Do you value empathy? What does that look like? And you look for those things in those companies. For me, I live in America right now. Most of my product team is on the West Coast, which means my day doesn't get started until about 10 or 11 Central Time. But I stop at 5. They will continue to go until 7:30 my time because they are on the West Coast. When I moved to Germany in the fall, I am not working American hours in Germany. It's 9 hours ahead of West Coast. It's inhumane. But I do know that there may be times that I have to work later to accommodate them, and they will have to get up early to accommodate me. So it's a little bit of a push-pull there with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Woon, what's your question?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. How do you know you're going to be good at UX research? I mean, I could pivot into UX research or another career that allows me to do research, like equity research, but I was just kind of curious. What's your take on that?
I just wanted to echo, I have the same question. So I'm exploring this as a career change. So I'd love to hear about how you would be successful or enjoy it, or some of the strengths you feel that align well with this field.
I can take a stab.
Yeah, go for it.
So I transitioned into UX research. How I knew I liked it, because I did it. The biggest thing is I was able to test it out at work. I was very fortunate. I had a work environment where I was able to like plan research, run it. And I really liked moderating and talking to people. And so I'd say like the biggest thing is just trying it out, even running a heuristic evaluation or finding a way to just try it out and see if you like it, because that's the lowest risk without having to get a job. It's like just running a small experiment essentially. Is like, test it out, see if it works, what doesn't work. And then you might have to run multiple variations of it. And I think the other thing Lori mentioned was just introspection and reflecting on what you had in the past, what you liked in the past, what are transferable skills potentially that you could bring? And are those what give you energy? Because if it's draining and it's not worth it, then it might not be for you. But I think you have to determine what is what you value. I'd say the other thing is research can be really exhausting. So we've run research. There are times where you're running like 5 to 8 1-hour interview sessions in a day, possibly, depending on how you schedule it. That's exhausting because you're listening very deeply to someone process information. And if that's something that is appealing, especially if you're doing qualitative, then it might work. And you just have to like find ways. There's ways to counteract that. You can schedule a day where you're not doing any research and you can kind of recoup. But that's, it is draining. It can be draining, but you find ways to accommodate for that. But if it's worth it to you, but that's just some things that to just know it can be a bit more tiring than you might expect. It's essentially like listening. If you're ever in those workshops at work and all that, or you've been in workshops, it's kind of like that all day. Because you're so engaged and you have to listen so hard.
Yeah, it's so true. So true.